Your media team doesn't hate deadlines, data, and structure. They just probably hate how you are currently managing those things. In just 2.5 years, I built an in-house media team from 0 to 18 full-time members. This generated 350 pieces of content per week, leading to billions and billions of impressions every single year. Today, we're gonna go through the philosophy of training and leading creatives, the tactical blueprint for training and leading a media team, and what it looks like to be a leader that is worth following. Now, I personally believe there are a lot of different theories, philosophies, and beliefs out there around how to lead a creative team. And personally, I believe the majority of them are not correct. And so what I want to walk you through is some mindset shifts that we need to go through in order to get into the place where we can understand the tactics. First, we have to adjust the way our mind works. Then we can go into what we're going to do next. Shift number 1, training is not about control. Actually, the more you try to control the process, the more you stifle the creative process and innovation that could occur. But because your hands are in every little thing, you're stopping it from happening. And this reminds me of a manager I had on one of my previous teams. And this individual was brilliant. I'm talking IQ off the charts, understood his platforms like on a totally different level. We brought him onto the team as a manager. And so he started coming up with all these ideas for long form videos that we were doing. And they were incredible. I'm talking like innovative, changing the way everyone was making long form video content. But eventually we got to this point where this individual was the only one who was generating the ideas. And because of this, we hit kind of a plateau. We stopped having new innovative ideas and we kept doing what we knew was working. We kept doing slight iterations of the same thing and our numbers started going down. And so I noticed that this individual was always the one that was doing the research, putting together what the title and thumbnail were gonna be, putting together the outline, pitching everything, running the whole production day of. He was running every single little piece. And in the beginning, it didn't seem like there was anything wrong with it because we were getting good results. But once we started to plateau, I realized we need to involve the team because ultimately, I don't believe in a fully top-down strategy approach. I believe in creating an environment and equipping your team to enable them to have a bottom-up strategy. And so what I challenged this manager to do is take 2 weeks and not pitch any new ideas, not come up with anything new, and instead have the team do it. So instead of this person putting together the brief, the concept, title, thumbnail, outline, all of that, he taught his team how to do it. And what was the result? Well, we came up with a lot of new formats that worked really, really well. But more importantly, we enabled the team and taught them how to do this moving forward. So instead of this manager now, after 2 weeks, returning to the same thing, this manager now had more time available to work on more valuable, higher impact activities because the team was now capable of doing this. So it no longer made sense for him to deploy his time towards that. He could start working on much bigger picture projects. Now, one quick important qualifier here. I don't want this to sound like I'm saying like we should all be singing Kumbaya by the fire and everybody's ideas are perfect. That is definitely not the case. There are some people on the team that they would pitch new ideas every time and they put in good work, but they weren't good ideas because that's not their skill set. Maybe they were a much better videographer or a better editor, and there's nothing wrong with that. The key is being able to know your team, know what the individual strengths are, and leverage those to the best of your ability so that you are utilizing them in their greatest strengths and not wasting time with their weaknesses. This is not me saying that everybody on the team should be contributing ideas, but the ones who are good at it, enable them to do it. Don't have the leader always coming up with what everybody should be doing. So as you can see here, this leader, this manager took the approach that many leaders do when overseeing a media team. And they took the top-down kind of authoritarian approach, the top-down directive mindset, believing that their job is the most crucial part in the process and that their whole role is here to control the team. But in reality, I believe as a leader, it is your job to empower and equip the team to be able to do those things on your behalf. If it's just you, you're not going to be able to scale or have the impact that you desire. So you need to build the system, process, and culture that allows your team to amplify your efforts and scale far faster than you ever could controlling it all yourself. On the contrary, the best leaders create an environment where people feel comfortable bringing new ideas, pitching new concepts, and aren't afraid that the leader is no longer going to hear their new ideas because maybe they didn't like one of them. You want to create an environment where people come back and come back and come back with new ideas. Again, what we're trying to do is create an environment where you can delegate tasks out to your team and not be controlling and running every single little thing. Because if you believe that you are the one that should be running every little thing, that's pretty audacious of you. I don't think that there is a person in the world who is the subject matter expert on all of the different platforms. It would be impossible. And so what you want to do is create an environment where you enable the individuals to be the subject matter experts on the platforms they own, and then they can drive the strategy, and you can go back and forth and be a sounding board and give them feedback, corrections, be able to notice anything that maybe they are missing that because of your experience and context of the whole picture, you can help bridge the gap on. Now, something you can do to help with this, and I've talked about it in previous videos, is assign out platform ownership to individuals. So instead of having 3 different editors making content for your Instagram page, for example, assign that ownership to one person and have their full-time job be making content for Instagram. What you can then do is you can delegate ideation and strategy of Instagram to that individual. Now, I'm not saying that you need to, again, like I said earlier, you don't wipe your hands clean of it and never touch it again. What you do is you are able to then focus on the bigger picture of how this micro strategy for this one platform fits into the entire brand campaign and ethos that you have the most context on. The next shift that we're going to make here is realizing that there is a pretty significant difference between managing creatives and leading creatives. Managing creatives often looks like accomplishing the goal we have by telling your team or the individuals exactly what to do. On the contrary, leading creatives oftentimes looks like casting a big vision, giving clarity on deadlines and expectations, sharing what the mission and vision and values of the project are, equipping them with the proper tools in order to take ownership of the project, not just be a task doer. I remember a while back, I was given a pretty significant campaign to run for a large platform company. And when this project was handed over, it was communicated that it was of the utmost importance. High urgency, high importance, high value, and kind of a high risk if we didn't execute it properly. Now, given all of this context, I could have easily viewed this project as this is something that I need to take full control on. I need to be completely involved. I need to run what the concept is. I need to come up with the concept. I need to create the shot list, the script, everything. That could have been a very natural feeling for me. And I'd be lying if I didn't say that there was an immediate reaction like, okay, I need to be more involved in this project. But instead of me going into a silo, jumping down into the bat cave and, coming up with the whole concept, writing the script myself, I actually immediately roped in my creative director, my DP, and my lead editor. And instead of giving them the directive of what we're going to do, I casted the vision, shared the importance of this project, and shared what the mission, what were we trying to accomplish with this campaign. I told them what the budget was, what the timeline is, and I allowed them to come up with what the concept was, what the shot list was, what gear we were gonna need, what talent we were gonna have to hire for the actual shoot. And what this did is it led to a far better piece of creative than I ever would have come up with on my own. Now, real quick, I wanna make sure that it's very clear. I checked in along the way. Like, there were multiple times along this project that I chimed in and I made sure that hey, did we think through this part? Did we factor in this variable? Did we think about the fact that the wind is gonna be insane and we're trying to block the sunlight, but maybe that thing is gonna take off like a fucking sail? I was definitely trying to make sure that we were good to go and everything was dialed, but I didn't want to micromanage it. And ultimately what I wanted to show my team is that I trust you, I believe in you. And I know that you can do this, not only for this project, but I also believe the more you do that, the more that you set them up for success in the future, for projects coming down the road where I'm gonna need to rely on them again. The next shift that I would argue is possibly the most difficult out of all of these for anybody that is going into a place of leadership is the transition from high performance, high volume individual contributor to leader. It's almost like, and I don't want to sound dramatic here, like all of those people online that say this term way too loosely. It's really like an identity shift. You have to change where you derive value. I remember at VaynerMedia, for example, I built a reputation of being a pretty high performance, high output individual contributor. I'd be lying if I said I didn't get a lot of fulfillment out of that, and if it didn't, stroke my ego a little bit, if you know what I'm saying. I got a lot of self-worth out of it. And when I transitioned into a place of leadership, it was such an interesting transition to make, because no longer was I getting recognized for putting out 8 shorts in a day or getting this video edited in 24 hours, all of these very easily attributable items and accolades that I could receive, I was no longer getting, because I was overseeing the team. All of a sudden, my output wasn't my output, it was the team's output. And so I remember making this transition, and for a second there, I actually started feeling a little down on myself, because I mean, let's be real, I wasn't getting the daps, I wasn't getting the love, I wasn't getting the shout outs in the team meetings that I used to. And it was such a weird transition. And so what I would encourage you is, if you are in that transition, or maybe you went from being an individual contributor to being a leader, but you never actually made that transition mentally, here's how I would recommend you approach it. Instead of looking for the individual shout outs for what you're doing as your source of validation and value within the organization, you now have to look at when your team gets those shout outs. When an editor gets a video done in 24 hours like you used to, now you have to internally take that and take credit for that. You've built the environment that allows that to occur. And so now you have to derive your value from a completely different place. When your team is doing really well, that's how you can feel good about your work. When your team isn't doing well, that's a sign that you need to improve, or there's an area that you need to dive in deeper to. The shift also requires you to let go of perfectionism and start relying more on coaching, mentoring, and training, because you're not the one making the individual pieces of content anymore. You are now overseeing the people that are making the individual pieces of content. And guess what? They're not going to do it the same way you do. Like, for example, I think Trevor and I, we've worked together for a very long time now. We understand each other's styles and preferences. We do things differently. A lot more the same than different. But there are some things, choices that Trevor makes creatively that would be different than how I would do it. But I don't jump in and micromanage and control everything that he does. I trust him. And I give the reins up on that. I also have a fundamental belief that the majority of that shit is subjective. And if it's subjective, unless I have a very strong preference around it, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to default to what he wants to do. I want to equip and empower him and show him that I trust him in the work that he is producing for me. So something that you can do to help with this is, instead of ending your day with, what did I get done today? What was my output? Start asking yourself, what did my team get done today? What was their output? What roadblocks were they encountering that I just knocked out of the way for them and made their job easier? What context did I give to one of my designers that allowed them to have a breakthrough on the project that they were stuck on? Start making the questions that you ask yourself more about how your team is performing, less about your individual performance. Because ultimately, your individual performance isn't individual. It's a collective of what the team does, not what you are doing. Now, the next shift might sound obvious, but it is alarmingly not, apparently, given how a lot of people run their media teams. The shift is recognizing that fear, micromanagement, and lack of ownership are the silent, invisible killers of creativity. They don't empower or enable it. And so all of these individuals that are running their teams, utilizing micromanagement, invoking fear in order to get their team to comply, this is accomplishing the exact opposite of what you are wanting to do. On the fear front, I can think of so many different examples, but one that I really love that enables the team to take risks and feel like they are empowered to do so rather than timid to do it is a frame that I've given that I think is absolutely incredible. It sounds kind of cheesy. You can borrow it if you want. It's a saying called, "We love a good flop." And basically what this does is it shows the talent that I'm working with, but also the team, that it's okay to experiment, try new shit, and fail. Because ultimately what we're wanting to do is continue to do that. If you're experimenting, how often is it that every single time you experiment, it's going to be a success? 0. None. You're not going to have that happen. In order to actually create innovation and experiment, you have to be okay with having shit fail. The amount of people that I have talked to over the last year that have a brand that is fairly well known online, but they've stalled. They've hit a ceiling and they can't go any further. But they're also unwilling to try new shit that's not gonna perform, that's gonna flop, that's gonna get like literally a 10th, a 20th of the views of their normal content. That is okay. And here's the little side note. If you have something that flops, guess what? Nobody gives a fuck. 30 seconds after they scroll past it, they've already forgotten about that piece of content anyways. So whether or not it had 13 likes or 13 million likes, it doesn't really matter. They're not remembering it. So with We Love a Good Flop, instead of making the team feel bad when they tried something new and it didn't work, I applauded it. I praised it. I celebrated it. And what I always try to do is any talent that I'm working with, whatever the client is, whatever the brand is, I want them to understand that we love a good flop. Because what I want to make sure is it's not just me or you, the leader of the team. You have to have everybody in leadership bought into this principle. Now, I'm not saying that you want a week's worth of flops. Like if we have 7 days in a row where everything is underperforming, okay, that is a problem. That's not something to celebrate. That's something to investigate and make some serious changes on. Performance matters. I'm not saying we throw data, tracking, and performance out the window. What I'm saying is we be very intentional that we know when we are trying something new, we encourage the fact that it might work, but more than likely it won't. And that's okay, because the more times we fail in our experimentation, the closer we get to winning. So ultimately what happens is when creatives are afraid of failing or afraid of making mistakes, they just stick to the same thing over and over, and it becomes very uninspired work. That shows itself in the output, but what a lot of people don't realize is that actually affects the individual and how involved or engaged they are within the entire process. And so what I would encourage you to do is build a culture where failure is a stepping stone, not a career-ending mistake, potentially even something worth celebrating. If you do this, I think you will find that your team brings a lot more new ideas to the table and doesn't just bring ideas, but they actually execute on those ideas. Now back to the story about the big commercial campaign that I was working on for that platform company. If I would have micromanaged the entire process, I guarantee a couple of things would have occurred. One, the project would not have turned out the way that it did and had the success that it did. Two, my team would have felt like, wow, Caleb really doesn't trust us. And so there would be this sense of doubt in the back of their minds on any future projects, which that is just going to slow everything down and lead to worse results, not better. And number three, I don't think we would have gotten the feedback. So I know the results were really good, but we literally had people commenting on the ads, asking for more ads. When have you ever seen that before? That never happens. That's an absolute miracle. That would not have happened if I was in there meddling with every little thing, because they would not have been able to create the best work possible. They would have been making the best work to please Caleb. And so something you can do to help with this is just a very simple frame shift. Think of more checking on, not checking in. How are you doing? What is the status of this project? Are there any problems that are coming up? Is there anything that I can help with? Are there any roadblocks that I can eliminate for you? Versus, hey, how's the lighting looking on this? How's the framing? How's the, frame rate? Do you have everything rolled? Like, when we set up a production like this and we're filming, I check in with Trevor on like, hey, how do I look, right? Because unfortunately, I'm a human with a little bit of vanity and I want to make sure I don't look completely ridiculous. But other than that, I pretty much leave it up to him. Like he'll ask me, hey, you want to come look at this, take a look, see if you like it. But for the most part, I just trust and enable Trevor to make those calls, not me micromanaging the set and how everything is going to look. I mean, even on this video, we had to make a couple of significant pivots due to weather and changing lighting and wind and all kinds of crazy things on where we were going to film these. Trevor made the call of filming in this location. And I think it's so fucking cool. It was not what we originally had planned, but I trust him. And I want him to know that I trust him so that he can continue to take more and more ownership as we move forward. And the third silent or invisible killer of creativity is a lack of ownership. I remember, I'm gonna use Trevor as another example back to back here. I was overseeing all of our short form efforts and I was reviewing every single short form video that we were putting out. It was absurd. It got up to like, I think a couple hundred videos a week. I mean, it was absolutely crazy. And with everything else I had going in my role, I could no longer do it as effectively. Looking at Trevor, I had this editor who was emerging as a leader on the team. I felt like there is this individual who I think fundamentally understands shorts to the same level, if not higher than I do, and has a lot more capacity to be able to train the team and give far more detailed feedback and assistance to the other editors. And so I made a choice in delegating short form review to Trevor. Did I give him all of our video content? No. I delegated a smaller chunk, but a very big piece of our puzzle to him. And what did this bring about? Well, Trevor took on a whole lot more ownership. I saw his engagement in his work increase, which I didn't think was possible. He was already very engaged, but I saw that increase and improve. And what this ended up doing is breeding a leader within the team. It was only a few months later where then I promoted him to be a manager and actually have people that were reporting to him at the age of 22 years old, which is absurd. But I truly believe that the more ownership you give to the right individuals, the more they will give you in return. Now, a fun side bonus to this is in delegating that and giving him ownership over that task, that activity, I freed up a lot more time for myself to focus on bigger picture items. I was no longer having to work day to day and be in the moment. I could start to think about 3, 6 months, 12 months, 36 months down the road and how what we were doing today impacted tomorrow. And for Trevor, this was the moment where I saw him shift from being a task doer to being a leader who owns his work. Now, one thing I want to qualify here is ownership can take on varying levels. You can chunk it up or you can chunk it down. So for example, instead of maybe giving somebody ownership over an entire campaign or even an entire video shoot, maybe what you do is you give them ownership over the sound. And so they're monitoring the audio and making sure that the levels are correct, nothing's popping, nothing's going wrong. Or maybe you give them ownership of the lighting, an element of a bigger project. Again, you can chunk up or chunk down however you want. And so what I would encourage you to consider doing is give more ownership to your team and have them come up with the strategies, the game plan, the agenda. Have them create that and then bring it to you for review. And this is a moment where then you get to engage in informal training. The beauty. I mean, it's amazing. They're bringing this problem to you. What a beautiful, opportune moment to be able to invest in educating them, training them, and growing their skill set. Rather than you doing everything yourself, this allows the team to take more ownership and run with your vision for you. Now, the final shift we need to make is destroying a huge myth that exists in our culture today, which is that creatives don't care about business results. This could not be further from the truth. They care deeply when they are aligned properly and informed of how their work ladders up to the bigger picture of the company at large. See, many leaders assume that creatives only care about artistic integrity, not conversions, impressions, or revenue. But again, this couldn't be further from the truth. More than likely, if you're experiencing this in your organization, it's mainly or solely because you haven't done a good job of communicating how their work fits into the greater big picture of the organization and how their work actually drives revenue. And this reminds me of a previous team that I had where in the company, we were pushing these monthly seminars. And before we started to have any sort of reporting on how the organic content was leading to seminar sales, honestly, the team couldn't give a fuck. They couldn't care less about it. But something very powerful happened. We were working on this documentary piece that was kind of centered around these seminars. And we put together this amazing video that we released. But before we released it, we actually had worked with the marketing and sales department to put better tracking in place in order to see how the organic content actually led to sales. Well, we put this video out and it sold out an entire seminar. The whole month was sold out from this one video. Now, one, that editor, she was fucking stoked and very amped and felt extremely fulfilled and felt like, wow, I am bringing an extremely valuable contribution to my business, to this company that I work for. How amazing. But also the rest of the team saw that and quickly started thinking about what can we do in our content to drive more seminar sales. The moment that they become aware of how their work impacts sales, impacts revenue, impacts the business at large, suddenly they start thinking about it more and start caring about it more. It sounds ridiculous as I'm saying this, but like 99% of you aren't doing this. 99% of you, your media teams are just making content, and at most, you're reporting on the platform analytics and metrics that you care about, but you're not tying it into the overall bigger picture. And so they don't see what the actual vision or reason for them doing all of this work actually is. The truth is that when people are given visibility into how their work impacts the business, they become more engaged, not less. And so what I would encourage you to do is share the data. Show how your team's work is improving the business overall. Show how the organic content is driving profitability. Show how the paid media campaign was a success and increased sales. Give them context more than just their little silo of the platforms that they're making for. Show them how it impacts the business at large, and watch how your team starts thinking about business outcomes, not just likes, views, and comments. Now we're gonna go into the creative leadership philosophy. Now this will be a little bit more rapid fire. I'm gonna move a little bit quicker. So what I would encourage you to do is grab your favorite moleskin that you have sitting next to your laptop right now, grab that pen, and consider maybe taking a few notes here. And pause it if you need to. I'm probably gonna talk a little bit quicker than I normally do. The first one is to lead with empathy, not authority. Balance structure and freedom for your team. The real is that the best media teams thrive in an environment of trust and flexibility. Too much structure stifles creativity. Now, too little structure creates chaos. We don't want that. But if you create too much structure and process, you're gonna end up removing the creativity out of the entire picture. So the tactic here is to set clear expectations, but allow for autonomy within those boundaries. You define the what and let your team define the how. The next one is to encourage ownership and agency. Don't build a checklist army. Build an army of problem solvers. The truth is if you micromanage every single little detail, you rob your team of the ability to learn how to creatively problem solve. What this does is it not only hurts you in the short term, but it limits long-term growth for your team and for the individual. Now, the tactic here is to assign ownership to individuals over key projects. And the real kicker here is allow the creative to set the goal, the strategy, and the solutions. You're just there to help guide them along the way, not to do it for them. The third one is to operate in humility. Don't hog all the credit. Give the credit to your team. Leaders who hoard all the credit, they just stifle motivation. The team doesn't feel like they have their back, and it looks like they're just out for their own selfish best interests. Instead, shine a spotlight on all the amazing things that your team is contributing to the business. Again, anytime that you're getting praise, you're getting a shout out, push it back onto the team, because ultimately they're the ones that are doing the work. You're enabling them to be able to do it, but you would not be able to accomplish this without them. And so the tactic here is make it a habit to publicly recognize and praise individuals, reward them for their contributions publicly on your team calls, and then provide constructive criticism and feedback in private. So the key here is to reward and recognize in public and provide constructive criticism and feedback in private. Number 4 is less debating, more doing. If a creative and I on the team disagree on something, unless it's detrimental to the brand, I'm more than likely going to err on the side of their idea, not mine. And the reason why is more than likely my idea or my viewpoint is subjective. And I would rather spend less time going back and forth deliberating on which direction we're going to go. And I'd rather just go with theirs and find out what the audience thought of it. Did the audience like it? Was I wrong? More often than not, yes. Ultimately, creative is subjective. And so I don't want to impose my subjective view onto the team. I want the audience to determine it. Now, I do prefer to make my opinion known. And so that way, if we find out that it was wrong, they have more belief in what my opinion is the next time. It's on record, so they understand that, okay, yeah, maybe Caleb knows a thing or two on this. But again, I don't want to get bogged down by it. And so the tactic here is, instead of debating with your team, A/B test. Put out both of your ideas potentially, test them, see which one wins, and then use that to inform future decisions rather than your subjective call without any data to support it. And the next one is love data, don't fear it. Train the creatives on your team to embrace data as a tool, not a restriction. I think the reason why a lot of creatives have a bias against data is they've been told to. Oftentimes in their career, data has been used only to inform them of what they've done wrong, how bad they are, how much they suck. If that was the case for you, more than likely, you might have a weird feeling towards data because it hasn't treated you well. And so what I would encourage you to do is recognize that this is the case for a lot of creatives and know that you're going to give them a new view, a new perspective on the importance and value of data in the creative process. In a world where a lot of creatives view data as limiting, be the guiding light to show them that their data is empowering and can equip them to make far better creative, not something that is a constraint and a restrictor to their ability to make something amazing. Now, the tactic for this is very similar to a previous one. Have a weekly call where you recap the performance of the content you've been making. Show the data, show the metrics, show whether or not we had increased watch time or if watch time is going down, right? If the AVD on a YouTube video is going up, cool, we're doing the right things. If AVD on our videos on average is going down, maybe we need to reconsider how we're structuring the script. Show how data can enhance creative decisions, not restrict it. And the real talk here is that if you don't trust your team to make decisions on your behalf, maybe you didn't hire the right people, or maybe you don't have a good onboarding and training program for your team. Maybe it's not their fault, maybe it's your fault. And if you feel that way, if that struck a chord, if you felt a little uncomfy when I said that, then I would encourage you, do an audit. Look at your team. Why do you not trust them? If it's simply a training issue, well then cool. Invest more of your time. And yes, what that does mean is that you will do your current activities in the evening because you're spending your days training the team. But guess what? That's part of the burden and opportunity of being a leader. Ultimately, leadership isn't about making every great decision. It's about equipping and empowering your team to make the great decisions on your behalf. And so a strong leadership philosophy sets the tone. It's very important, but it's how you actually execute the day-to-day actions that move the needle forward. And one of the biggest pieces of that is how you give feedback. See, the way that you provide feedback and give critique can either propel your team forward or cause them to live in a world of overthinking and self-doubt. So in this next section, it's my goal that we go over how to build a culture of feedback that promotes growth, not fear. And now we are on to the tactical blueprint for leading and training your media team. We're taking philosophy and theory, and now we're putting it into practice. And so where we're going to start with this is encouraging the good. Don't just tell them what needs to be corrected. Tell them what to continue doing. Tell them what they did right, not just what they did wrong. If you were to look at how I review any sort of content, right? Whether it's a design or a video, I do my very best to point out more of what I like and what I want the creative to do moving forward and less on what I want them to change. A quick qualifier, of course, you have to tell them what to change, right? Like if there's a spelling error, if there's a moment that is taken out of context and is, harmful to the brand, or if there's a moment that feels redundant and it actually loses the audience's interest, well, yes, of course, let's tell the editor to cut that, for example. But if you were to look at how I give notes on a video, and we use frame.io, but there's many different programs out there that you can use for leaving notes on videos, you would see that an overwhelming amount of my comments are what I want the editor to continue doing. Here's a great example. In the first video that we posted on YouTube, when I talked through my career journey and everything, there's a couple stories that I tell about different individuals that maybe the audience doesn't have context on. I talk about working with Flex Lewis, one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time. But if you're not into bodybuilding, you probably don't know who that is. And so Trevor in the edit did an amazing job of picking moments that would be able to provide context on who Flex is, as the example, in a very short amount of time. And these are called cutaways. And so if you look on Frame, I literally left a note saying, I love this cutaway. You did a great job with this, something to that effect. And what I'm wanting him to know is, one, I appreciate that. That was a great moment. Good call. I want him to feel the appreciation there. But two, I'm also thinking strategically. We're going to be making more videos in the future. And I would like him to do something similar if we ever have a moment that is lacking context. And so it is my belief that when you point those things out, you reduce the amount of mental fatigue that an editor has to go through on their next project. Because the reality is the majority of editors, and if you're an editor watching this, I guarantee you're fucking nodding your head like crazy right now, is you are met with all the things that you need to do differently, but you're never told what you should continue to do. And so when you go on to the next edit, sure, you know what not to do, but you're kind of spending a lot of energy wondering, what should I continue doing? If the creative director, brand director, whatever it is, doesn't tell you, hey, I like this cutaway, well then how do you, the editor, know that you should continue doing that? And so I like to reduce the amount of energy that they have to expend on a project. So it's my job to reinforce the things I want them to continue doing, and then our momentum and speed picks up. Their learnings pick up. They improve in their skills so much faster because they know what to continue doing, and then they can deploy a lot more energy on focusing on how to improve the deficits within their skills that they have. In a world where the majority of feedback is based on the corrections that need to be made, be the one who reinforces the behaviors that you want to see turn into habits. Now, if you're looking for your first thing to write down as far as what to do, and maybe even do this over the next 2 weeks, any creative you're reviewing, make it a goal to make more comments about what you liked and want to see continued in future work versus more comments on what you want to see changed. Now, in addition to calling out all the things that you want your team to continue doing, that's super powerful. I'm going to take it a step further. And this is going to make the perfectionists watching this very, very uncomfy. And this is the for future reference rule. We're still in Frame.io giving notes, right? Well, we've called out all these things that we want our individuals, the editor in this example, to continue doing. Great job. That's amazing. The next thing is going to be corrective notes. These are revisions that you're providing. These are things that, like, maybe it's a spelling error, or maybe it's the way that a shot was framed, or the color correction on a shot. What I want to call out immediately is the majority of those notes are subjective. Now, a spelling error, that's not subjective, that's super objective. And that's critical, in my opinion. But the majority of these notes are subjective and not mission critical. What do I mean by mission critical? If it is going to destroy the video, meaning if we don't fix this, nobody's going to understand what is being communicated. No one's going to hear the story. No one's going to understand the point. Well, okay, that is mission critical. Another mission critical thing would be, does this hurt the brand? Is this a moment that's taken out of context, and so it sounds far more intense or not aligned with the typical brand messaging that that brand puts out? Well, if it doesn't check those two boxes, then I don't believe that it is mission critical. And what I'm about to say applies more so to short form, or actually not short form, but high volume content. And I'll explain more on that in a second. But in high volume content, I believe that if it's not mission critical, I want to inform the editor in this example, hey, let's frame this, or let's do this punch in differently next time. A really typical thing that you see with editors is if they're editing a one camera shoot, they'll do punch-ins. But oftentimes an inexperienced editor will have the wide shot and the tight shot, the eye line won't match up. And any experienced editor will know, like, that is an egregious error. Like, that is horrible and very traumatic for the viewer to experience. But somebody who is more junior isn't gonna know that. And instead of bogging them down on making them make that micro adjustment, do I think that's going to kill the video? No. Is it a preference of mine? Yes. Cool. So what I will do is I will leave a note and say, hey, love the way this edit is flowing so far. One note for future reference. I love when we punch in on a shot for the eye line to match up. So the wide shot and the tight shot, the eye is in the same part of the frame. And that way it's not as abrupt and doesn't feel so like jarring for the viewer. Do you see what I did there? I shared the revision, the note, the corrective note that they should make, but I said, let's do this on the next video for future reference. And I shared the why. I am trying to expedite the learning of the editors on my team. And I have found that this is the fastest way to do that. The other thing is, like I said, the majority of these notes are subjective. I have no idea if changing the font color from blue to orange is gonna make the video better. So rather than me placing my subjective opinion, again, if it's high volume content, like typically you can think of like shorts as a high volume medium, well then let's just put it out into the market and let them decide. Now, to the high volume comment that I made, I believe that this method definitely makes more sense for high volume content. Here's an example. We are putting out, at least right now, one YouTube video a month, roughly. So we have a lot of time in between each video. It's a long feedback loop. And so the idea of, well, let's let the audience determine it. Yeah, we do that on some things, but ultimately we don't have that luxury because we're not getting that feedback fast enough. For us, I do leave notes on what should be corrected. And I do usually, I'd say probably 80%, 90% of them are, let's correct it on this video. I'd say 10 to 20%, even with Trevor right now, like with our lower volume once a month cadence, are like, hey, let's do this in the future. Don't worry about it now. So I still do that, but I reduce the amount that I do that because of the distance between implementation and feedback. On the flip side, if you're putting out 14 Instagram reels a week, you're getting a pretty good feedback loop there. And so that's where I do like to say for future reference. I think the speed of getting the content out there and getting the learnings from the audience is far more valuable than taking it from 80% to 95 or to 100. Now, the tactic that you can take from this, if you want like an actionable thing that you should just do starting now, is distinguish your corrective notes into for future reference and for now. If you have historically always been in the for now camp, well then let's start at a very basic level. Let's have 30% of your feedback be for future reference and 70% be for now. You know your team, you know the content you're making best, way better than I can through this camera lens right now. And so you're gonna have to adjust and experiment based on your needs. There is not a golden rule for what ratio to have. You know, it's not like, well, every single time you want an 8-to-2 ratio or a 4-to-1 ratio. No, fuck that. You have to figure it out. And so start with 30-70 and then test from there. Increase it. See how that goes. Monitor it over a month. Do you see an improvement, an increase in speed? Or are you just putting out a lot of videos that have spelling errors or have, terrible color correction? And then evaluate what you should allocate percentage-wise to for future reference for now based on those learnings. And the next one you're going to notice is a recurring theme throughout this video, which is make an environment that is safe to make mistakes in. Like we've talked about, fear kills creativity. So create an environment where they can experiment and fail. And the big important part is the fail part. A lot of you are very comfortable with your team experimenting as long as they win. If this post does really well, sweet, the experiment was great, I love it. But if we experiment and the post does terrible, well, then we're disappointed in the team and we make that known. That is not the way to approach this. They're not going to be incentivized to ever experiment and try new shit again. What oftentimes happens is if you have a culture of fear, you're going to have all of your creatives making safe shit they know is going to work or feel is going to work based on previous performance. There's not going to be any innovation that is happening. And so if you're looking for a tactic or something to write down that you can do from this, here it is. Create an environment where people can fail. And whether you want to use my saying or not, what I really try to do with my teams is I really, really want them to embrace we love a good flop. It got to a point on my previous team where if one of the editors made a video and they were like all hyped about it, they spent all day on one short because I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go crazy. And they put all these cool graphics and all of this amazing editing and so many cool sound effects and sound design and music. And it was high energy and it flopped. Well, we built a culture where instead of me calling it out, they would call it out because they saw me do it. As a leader, you need to model for your team how you want them to behave. And so I showed the team that whenever I make something or had an idea that didn't work, I was the first one to admit or message in the chat, hey, we love a good flop, right? This one flopped big time. It was a big bomb. Well, all of a sudden the team started doing that. I think this is super important. And I think it creates an environment too, where you don't have these individuals that are like pointing fingers and being like, you didn't get a good clip or whatever. There's no weird blame that occurs in that. What you end up finding is morale increases and the team grows tighter, not further apart. Another thing about fear is not only does it eliminate innovation and creativity, it also eliminates transparency. If you have a culture where your team is afraid of failing, they will fail, but when they do, they are far less likely to make you aware of that failure. And sometimes the failures are tiny and you don't need to know. Sometimes they are of great magnitude and you should be very aware of it. Ideally earlier on in the process of the failure rather than at the completion of it. And so please do not create these environments of fear like the majority of media teams are ran. Now, in light of making an environment that is safe to fail and safe to make mistakes, why not dedicate an entire day to this? I love and I encourage you to run what I call content hackathons. This is an entire day devoted to making shit that the team does not normally make. The whole goal of this is innovation. It's not performance. It's to try new shit. So let me tell you about how I have ran content hackathons. First off, when I first started with it, I had what I would call a misaligned incentive. What we would do is we would do the content hackathon all day. They would make all the content. We would post it. And then we would measure who got the most impressions in the first 48 hours. That was how we would determine a winner. So we would post everybody's content throughout the week, measure it over the first 48 hours, and then whoever won would get, like a $150, $200 Amazon gift card, which is fucking great. But here's the problem. I was incentivizing safety. I was not incentivizing innovation and experimentation. I was ultimately not making an environment that was conducive for that because what we were measuring success on and what we were determining the winner on was impressions. And what is that going to lead the team to do? Well, they're all competitive as fuck. They want to win. So what are they going to do? They're going to make the thing that they think will get the most impressions. Not the thing that they believe is the most innovative, not something that they've never done before. They're going to play it safe. And so that was my biggest lesson from running the content hackathons was like, you want a properly aligned incentive. So let me tell you how I run them now. What I like to do is typically I do these on a Thursday or a Friday. You can do it any day in the week, so it doesn't really matter. And I typically run them quarterly or as frequently as monthly. But I have found that monthly sometimes with high volume teams is a little tough. It's literally a full day that you're blocking where you're not doing anything in your normal day to day. So any projects that you're working on, you're not working on those during this day. So that's why I like to run it quarterly. So every quarter, I run a content hackathon where I make sure that it's on the team's calendar the week before, probably actually like 10 days before, I'm sending out a message being like, hey, next Friday is the content hackathon. Please ensure that you, one, reschedule any meetings that you have during that time. Two, make sure to meet with your manager and go over what your workload is so that you're going to be able to dedicate a full day to this. The last thing that you want is the whole team doing this and one or two characters that didn't plan ahead and they have to work on the edit that's going out the next day. I have seen that happen. I've allowed that to happen. And what I've noticed is that creates a very strange dynamic in the team and it makes the other people participating in the content hackathon feel like it's not as important. It's not a priority for the team. And so I always make sure everyone's planning around this, almost like it's a vacation. Get your work done ahead of time so you can dedicate the day. Two, I make sure that everyone understands what the content hackathon is. So typically I would have like a Monday huddle. In the Monday huddle, if this is happening on Friday, I'm going to walk them through what we are doing and what the objective, what the goal is, what the vision of content hackathons are. One, it's good to be reminded. Two, if you're a growing team, every quarter you might have new individuals on the team that have no idea what the fuck a content hackathon is. And so this is how I like to explain it to them. Team, this is a day that I am blocking for you to be able to do whatever you have wanted to do, but have been afraid to make because you weren't sure how it was going to perform. If you're a data-driven organization, more than likely your team is making shit that they feel has a high likelihood of performing well. And that's good. But oftentimes that can create a vulnerability for innovation. A lot of times the team doesn't want to try new shit because they don't want one of their videos to fail. Well, I give them complete freedom. I say, this is a day where you can work on something that could be our lowest performer ever. We might not even post it. But guess what? That's fine. That is not the goal. We're not trying to hit the most impressions. So I share that. That's kind of the vision. And then I tell them, we're going to have a kickoff call at 9 a.m. Everyone gets on Zoom at 9 a.m. Or if you're in person, everyone gathers in the conference room. And we're going to go over kind of the rules. And the way it works is from 9 to 4 p.m. So 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., you have 7 hours to be able to work on anything that you want. And typically what I like to do is I like to send out like Uber Eats gift cards or whatever. Or if we're in person, I like to order lunch. That way they don't have to think about lunch. They don't have to go into their kitchen and cook. And then I inform them of the deadline, which is 4 p.m. At 4 p.m., you're done creating and you have 15 minutes to upload whatever you made to Google Drive and place it into a slide presentation that the whole team is going to have. Every individual has their own slide with their creative embedded in it. And we're going to go through and you're going to present your piece that you made. You're going to play it, show us it, we're going to read it, whatever the medium is. And then you're going to explain why you did it, why you feel like it is a compelling new form or new format of content that we could be making as a team. And then lastly, before we kick this off and actually begin the Content Hackathon, I let them know how the winner is going to be determined. And like I said before, I used to have a very terrible incentive for the team, but then I changed it to a team-wide vote. Who's going to know more than the team on what is innovative? The people that are making the content day in, day out, they're going to know what is different than what they normally make. And so I tell the team, I'm going to have you live vote on the call, anonymously, of course, on who you think made the most innovative and experimental piece of content that is still obviously relevant to our brand. Like, if we're an educational brand that teaches content on how to file your taxes, we don't need some sort of music video or something unrelated like that. We need something that's still in line with the brand, of course. But we want to push the envelope. And so I encourage the team to make something that they think their peers will find innovative. And then we kick it off and we roll into the actual Content Hackathon. And they have 7 hours to create everything. And then at the end of the day, we go through the presentation. And I love this part of it because not only do we get to see all these like cool new things, we also get to hear these individuals present on the why. They get to share their insight, their subject matter expertise, and how they came to the conclusion that this was a good idea, or sometimes how it was a bad idea. Maybe they thought it was going to be a great one, and 3/4 of the way through, they're like, well, fuck, this is not going to work, but I only have 20 minutes left. And so they end up explaining on the call what their original intention was and where we ended up and what they learned from it. And that's also extremely valuable. I really think that like on a lot of these teams, these individuals have an itch. They have an itch that they want to scratch. But again, like I said earlier, they're afraid to scratch the itch because they don't know if it's going to perform. I don't want them having that lingering thought in the back of their mind. So that's why I think content hackathons are so valuable. I can't tell you the amount of new formats that we got, new ways of scripting content, new packaging for YouTube videos. It has driven so much innovation in the various teams that I've been on. I highly recommend it. And if you're looking for the tactic from this, it's very simple. Schedule a quarterly hackathon. And if you want, we have a playbook on how to do this. You can download it. There's probably a link that pops up here somewhere. Download the playbook. It's very simple. It's like 1 or 2 pages, nothing complex. But it'll walk you through step by step how to set this up and how to have it be successful. I think you will find that your team loves it and starts to look forward to this day rather than it being some additional task or burden on their plate. Now, continuing this theme of experimentation, what I want to give you is the 70-20-10 framework. This is how I like to approach a lot of things, honestly, not just content, but let's use it in the context of content here. 70% of the content you're making should be shit you know is working. You're putting out content on Instagram. You see the audience is resonating with it and it's performing at minimum at a benchmark, if not more than benchmark. Okay, cool. We have enough data to support that this is something that the audience really likes and we know will consistently perform. So 70% of the content you produce should be in that bucket. 20% of the content that you produce should be iterating on that 70% and fine-tuning it, experimenting with it a little bit, changing a hook, changing the format, changing the structure of the video slightly. Nothing crazy. These are just refinements of the shit we know works. And then we get into the 10%. And this is the thing that the majority of teams leave out. And it's a huge mistake. They end up following just the 70%. Maybe if they're a little bit more advanced, they implement the 20% where they're iterating on the shit they know works. But the majority of teams never try this 10%. And 10% is where you're experimenting. This is where you're trying new shit entirely. We just talked about the Content Hackathon. The Content Hackathon falls in line with the 10%. It is operationalizing the 10%. It's marking off a day to ensure that the 10% definitely happens. But what you want to do is empower your team and equip them with this framework so that they understand that they can deploy 10% of their time to trying completely new shit. This is the only way that we're going to come out with the new formats, with new thumbnails, with new packaging. This is how we drive innovation. Brands grow on the 70%, but brands lead on the 10%. And so the tactic, the thing that you can implement here is equip your team with this framework. So what does it look like? Well, I wouldn't necessarily encourage you to tell the team every 10 pieces of content, make one completely experimental. What I would actually encourage you to do is every 30 days that you're working, have 3 of those days devoted to experimentation and trying new shit. The reason why I like the 3 days rather than one post every 10 posts is you're able to batch this out a little bit more and get a lot more efficiency out of it rather than having to, on a weekly basis, make sure that you're always trying something new. Typically, I find that when you're in that mindset, you can oftentimes come up with like 2 or 3 ideas versus if you're trying to make this happen every week, especially in the creative space, it's a little bit less efficient. Next, we want to make sure that we're building a real-time feedback loop. We don't want to be giving creatives feedback at the end of the project only. We want to be giving it to them throughout. And a really good example of this is there was a vlog that my team was working on that was around a more sensitive subject for the individual that we were filming. And they were being very vulnerable and transparent. But like any human, there were certain elements to this story that maybe they didn't want to highlight or share. And so rather than what I had done in the past, which was to give complete autonomy to the editor, which I love doing, but then so much so that I didn't check in throughout the process. And that was always a mistake because typically what I would end up finding is in the first version or the final edit or a very close to final edit, there would be something fairly significant that we need to remove or edit around that I could have noticed earlier on. Now on this vlog around the more sensitive subject matter, I did the opposite. I set up a weekly check-in. This was going to be a 4-week-long edit. And so I set up 4 different check-in points with the editor. I would sit down with her and ensure that we were aligned on what was okay and not okay to include in the video. And by week 2, we caught a pretty significant moment that she was making the crux. This was like the pinnacle point of the story, and she was going to craft the rest of the video around it. And I recognized that this was a moment that the talent we were working with would not want to include. And so rather than at the very end of the project, pointing that out and saying, okay, cool, you have to like completely redo this video, because we had frequent check-ins throughout the project, we were able to catch this before it became a massive nightmare. Every editor watching this is like, oof, been there. The amount of times that when I was an editor, I put in weeks on a project and then at the end would find out that what I built the whole narrative around was something that maybe the talent was not okay including. Ugh, it's the most painful thing in the world. Not only is it like painful and inconvenient for the editor, it's not efficient for the team. And so what I would encourage you to do, like the tactic from this is please implement more frequent check-ins with your team to provide feedback in real time rather than just at the end of a project. The next thing is that we are going to implement 5-hour-long presentations that we force every creative to sit through. You're laughing just as much as me, right? Like, how fucking ridiculous. Creatives don't learn best passively. Yes, I do think that trainings, presentations, Those are important. And I can touch more on that here in a little bit, but I really believe that the best form of creative training is hands-on. Creatives learn best by doing, not by just watching and listening. I bet some of you watching this have given a presentation or done a training over Zoom or in person with your media team. And about 15 to 20 minutes in, what do you start to notice? Lots of squirming and moving around, right? Because that's not how you engage those individuals. Now, I'm making a blanket statement here. Are there creatives that learn from formal training? Yes, of course. Not all creatives are the same. And I hate to make blanket statements. So I want to make sure that that's clear. But what I have found more often than not is if you do more of a workshop training where, let's say, for example, you have a team of short form editors, provide them all footage to edit, bring them into a room, and then one by one, go through everybody's edit and have everybody chime in with what they thought was good, what could be changed, what were missed opportunities, and allow for a hands-on training that is something that they're going to actually stay engaged with, learn from, and then make the changes in their actions according to what they learned. So I would encourage you, the tactic, the thing that you can do here is shift from just purely passive presentations and passive training to more tactical hands-on training with your team. We also want to give our team the freedom to solve problems. And how do we do that? We don't solve them for them. When they come to us with a question, instead of giving them the immediate answer, we can ask them a question back. We can give them the ability to solve the problem rather than always relying on us to do it for them. When you give the answer immediately, you rob them of the opportunity to think critically and gain the skill of solving problems. So the tactic is when they come to you with these questions, these problems to solve, take an inquisitive approach. Ask leading questions. Instead of giving them the answer, ask them, well, how would you approach this? Oftentimes they'll say, well, I don't know. That's why I'm asking you. And then you have to say, well, if I wasn't here, like if I wasn't on this shoot, if I wasn't in the office, if I was on vacation, if I got hit by a bus, what would you do? How would you solve this? Oftentimes, just that simple frame alone allows them or empowers them to see this problem in a new scenario where they are the problem solver, not you. So another example for you is instead of saying, use this transition effect, you could ask the question, what transition do you think would be best for this section in the video? What do you think would pair scene 1 with scene 2 most effectively? This puts the ball in their court, allows them to gain the skill of solving problems. And again, like I've been hammering throughout this video, it shows that you trust them and that you have confidence in their abilities. And the more that you trust them, their confidence is going to go up. And what you'll notice is they stop bringing so many problems to you. They start bringing you solutions, not problems. Another piece of the blueprint is give them opportunities to lead, not just you. I just got done talking about how much I like informal training. But I do believe that formal training is important and is a piece that you do need to put into play with your team. However, I don't think it always needs to be you, the leader. What I love to do is have a monthly team training. And what I do is I rotate between different members of the team and have them do a 30-minute presentation on something they are passionate about that will add value to the team. Think like storytelling, think sound design, think motion graphics. What you're wanting to do is have them share the thing that they are passionate about and a subject matter expert on with the team. This does so many different things. One, we learn more by teaching. And so you allow this individual to learn more and gain more knowledge on something they're already passionate around. Number two is you get to share that information with the team. And so you level everybody up. Number three is sometimes you find out interesting passions and skills that the team has that maybe you didn't know about before. And I'm not sure why this happens, but a lot of people within an organization don't inform their leadership of all the different skills that they have, all the different tools they have in their utility belt. And so oftentimes you have employees that are being significantly underutilized in a lot of cases. And what that can lead to is obviously that's not maximizing the result from the individual, but also they might not feel as fulfilled. And so by doing this, you give them the opportunity to reveal a new skill that you can tap into and give them more fulfillment in their work. And number 4 or number 5, I can't remember what number we're on for this, you invest in them as an individual. You give them the ability to hone in their communication and presentation skills. And that is something that is so valuable no matter where they are, whether they're at another organization, they're freelancing, starting their own company. Communication is something that creatives are often not taught to emphasize or work on, but I actually believe it's the most important thing. Creative is a commodity at this point. There's a million fucking incredible editors, better than you, the editor watching this right now. There are. But are you better at communicating your skill and your ability to craft a story out of nothing? If you are better at communicating, then you will win. And that's why I like to give my team the opportunity to build that skill. I'm investing in them as a human, not just within the organization or my team, but them long-term for their career forever. So the tactic, the thing that you can do here is schedule a monthly training for your team and then rotate between different members of your team and have them present on their subject matter expertise. Now, you're gonna get pushback from some people. They're gonna be afraid, they're gonna be freaked out, they're gonna be like, I don't know what to talk about, or, oh, I don't do public speaking. Do not allow this. Make sure you give them ample time. Like if you're telling them a week before, yeah, fuck you. That's awful. That is terrible. Especially for somebody who's like terrified of public speaking. Oh my God, what a nightmare. But if you give them ample notice and they express concern, fear, anxiety, don't alleviate it for them. Work with them. Have this be an opportunity, back to what we talked about earlier, to do informal training. Train them on the spot. Show them how you craft a presentation. Show them how you go about practicing it. Show them how many times you go through it. If you do your presentation like 20 times, odds are you're probably not going to be as nervous. But maybe they have no idea that that is even a thing. Maybe they think, all right, I make my presentation, try it once, and then I'm good. And so this is an opportunity for you to further invest in them. Don't take their pushback at face value. Know that you are doing them a big solid by doing this. Push past the current and momentary discomfort for the long-term gains. This next one was a big lesson that I learned the hard way off of me making a mistake or 2 or 3. This is having frequent check-ins with your team, and not just your direct reports, but the individuals a layer beneath it. Once a team gets to a certain level, typically you have a team lead, and then you have managers below that team lead, and then you have the doers below them. And a huge mistake that I made in scaling my last team, I delegated management to other individuals that I love and I think are great, but then I just walked away. And I would talk with the team in the hallway and stuff like that, but I didn't have a formal check-in process. And so I was not doing a good job of being aware of how these managers were doing. And I learned the hard way that things weren't going quite as I thought they were. Maybe there was a manager that wasn't doing a good job on providing feedback, or was showing up late to one-on-ones, or in one-on-ones was just not really paying attention or not being present with their team. What started to occur is there were some issues that people had with their manager, and I didn't see it bubbling up because I wasn't doing any check-ins. So what happens? Well, once it's boiling, you become very aware of the problem. And that's when I became aware of the problem. And at that point, it was almost too late. I had temporarily lost trust with those people that were reporting to this individual because I had placed them under this person. They used to report to me. I moved them over to a new manager, and I ensured them that everything would be great. But then I didn't check in along the process. It's kind of like what we talked about earlier with checking in on a project so that you don't get to the end of the project and find out that there's some big problem that you have to go back and correct. Well, it's kind of the same with team management. And so if you're the team lead or you're the CEO or CMO, some executive that oversees the media team, I would encourage you to schedule what is called skip step meetings, skip step 101s, check-ins. And this is where you're not going to the managers, you're going to the people below the managers to get real feedback on how are these managers doing? What are the things they're doing really well? What are the things that maybe you're confused by? What are the things that aren't going well that you would like to see changed? And it doesn't mean that you take every single thing that they say at face value. Obviously, some people are just gonna be natural complainers, right? And they're gonna have issue with anything. They'll always be able to find an issue. That you weed out. But anything that is a big red flag, for example, my manager doesn't ever show up to my one-on-ones, well, that is a huge problem. If you hear about that early on, you can correct it. But if you're not doing these skip steps, you might not find out until it's happened like 5 or 6 times. Because oftentimes within a tight-knit team, you have people that are very loyal to each other and don't want to be a rat. And so they're not like wanting to, rat on their manager to you. So you have to earn their trust by frequent check-ins and ask them the appropriate questions that gain insight for you, because you're not on these meetings. You're not in these calls. You have no idea how it's actually going. You have what your manager is telling you, but just because they're telling you everything's going smooth does not mean it is. And a little pro tip for you actually is, if your managers on your team are only telling you good things, that is a red flag. That is literally like a huge warning sign to like double investigate this, because more than likely they're just trying to hide all the things that are not going well and just promote the good things. The managers who are always telling me when they had a weird interaction with somebody, or there was a question that so-and-so brought up and I couldn't answer it and I felt kind of ill-equipped. Those are the managers that I'm not worried about. But the ones that are always presenting how great things are, those are the ones that you want to go a layer beneath and check in with the team to ensure that things are running smoothly. So the tactic, the thing that you can do here is schedule skip step 101s. Now, it doesn't need to be every week. You could do bi-weekly. You could do monthly. It doesn't need to be that frequent. But what you want is enough frequency that they trust you. Because maybe in the beginning, you're transitioning people from reporting to you to reporting to somebody else. But eventually, those managers are hiring new employees. They might not have as many touch points with you. And so trust has not been established. And so that's what you need to ensure that you do before they're ever going to tell you that they're having an issue with their manager. You need to establish trust. An over-reliance on top-down feedback, that is feedback that you're getting from your managers on how they're managing, this creates blind spots. You want to have context not only on how your team is doing, but on how your managers are doing at managing them. All right, y'all, we have made it to the third and final section of this video, which is being a leader worth following. Now, as you can see, it is dark out. We've been filming this all fucking day. It's crazy, but we really, really are passionate about this subject and we want to see real change occur within media teams across the globe. And so that is the whole intent behind this video. And without further ado, let's dive in. And I really believe that being a leader worth following starts with creating an environment where creatives thrive. And building an environment where your team thrives starts with leadership within your organization having a good understanding and being very clear on the value that your team is driving. And that takes me to point number 1, which is branding your team internally. Make them the gangsters, not you. I truly believe that if you are leading a team, it's not your job to take the credit. It's not your job to make yourself look good. It's your job to give out credit and to make your team look better rather than making your individual self look better. Now, a quick side note on this is if you are in an organization with good quality leadership in place, good leaders recognize this. Good leaders know that another good leader is not out there taking all of the credit. They're actually dishing it out to their team because they are creating an environment where their team is empowered and equipped to operate effectively. And so what I would encourage you to do is if you are the leader of your team, fucking hype them up on the team calls when you're with the whole company, right? Because we have like our media team huddles, but then typically the media team participates in maybe a company-wide huddle, whether that's weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever the cadence is. Be sure that you are hyping your team up. brand them just like you brand the company or business that you work for. And this doesn't only look like shout outs in team meetings. This also looks like when you have your one-on-one with the CEO or founder, making sure that you are sharing all of the amazing things that the individuals on your team are doing. Now, what a lot of people do is they go one step towards this. They're not like fully pot committed, but what they do is they'll say things like, my team did a great job. My team's killing it. My team is showing up consistently. My team is murdering. What you want to do is in these moments when you're meeting with the CEO, with the founder, the head of marketing, whoever your boss is, you want to clue them in on who is making what impact. So rather than saying my team is doing blank, you want to say Sarah went above and beyond on this edit. We had last minute revisions for her on Thursday night for a Friday morning upload. And she didn't even consider complaining. She just made it happen, got it done. And this was one of the greatest videos that we've done so far. She did an amazing job. And we had to do far less hand holding throughout the whole process. That would be a great way to brand your team. Now, Sarah is being viewed in light of the amazing work, quality, and time that she got this work done in by the CEO. And so the more that you can brand your team to the leadership within your organization, the more that you're going to bat for them. Whether they know it or not, this is a highly effective way to ensure that the CEO and founder continue to find value in the team and understand the value in each individual rather than making assumptions based on them not knowing the ins and outs of the role. Because let's be real, that happens all the time. A lot of organizations don't have visibility into what the media team is doing. And so if that is the case, then they become names on a page, just another cell in Google Sheets, rather than being the human who is actually providing immense value to the organization. And so that is your job, not theirs. How many times are they meeting with the CEO every week? Probably very infrequently. But you might be meeting with the CEO once a week, bi-weekly. And so it is your job to brand your team to leadership. Number 2 is to be their advocate and be their shield. Protect them from executive whiplash that occurs in many organizations. I remember back when I worked at Logos Bible Software, my creative director, Nick Kelly, man, that dude was the epitome of being a shield and an advocate. I remember that there was so many different commercials that we'd be working on that maybe the executive team had, we'll say, candid feedback for our creative team on. And Nick absorbed all of it. It never once reached down to me as the editor. I mean, it was unbelievable. In a world where a lot of my counterparts in other organizations would have the CEO march downstairs and yell in their face about how terrible the video was and how, I can't believe you didn't do XYZ and you did, ABC instead. Nick did an incredible job of basically shielding us from that. And it's not that the CEO or founders or anything like that are bad people or sinister. It's that they have very high expectations. They have many things going on. They're moving very fast and they're communicating in the way that they prefer, not in the way that maybe your team prefers. And so I believe it is your job as the leader to absorb the feedback, absorb the tough conversations, take it in, internalize it, and then regurgitate it to the team in a way that is going to be palatable and not induce fear and anxiety into them, but make them feel excited, stoked, and feel empowered to be able to accomplish this new objective. Maybe we're going to have to completely reshoot this whole entire campaign. Well, that fucking sucks. But I'd much rather hear it from somebody who is thinking about how I hear and how I best receive information than somebody who is in a hurry, just trying to communicate it very quickly and potentially is a little bit frustrated. This is not necessarily a rule, but an observation that I have noticed, which is that creatives tend to thrive in an environment that has consistency and psychological safety. Constant pivots or aggressive feedback and pushback from executives can cause extreme whiplash and disengagement from the team. What I'm not saying here is that feedback is a bad thing. Feedback is great. Tough feedback is also good, but feedback given in a aggressive, or let's just call it mean asshole kind of way, is far less effective. And so I think what we're trying to do here is, as the leader, it's kind of your job to absorb the good and the bad. And then you can take that, reframe it, and repackage it for the team in order to make it far more effective for them to be able to act on what you are sharing. So a tactic that you can put into place is, let's use a tangible example. If you are in the middle of editing a big campaign hero video, for example, and your editor is currently working on the edit, and maybe an executive walks into the edit bay, and you can just tell there's a little bit more of an aggressive tone, you can just very simply say, hey, can we walk to the break room? Hey, can we go to the kitchen? Hey, can we go for a walk to talk about this video? Anything you can to take them away from the team. Again, not that we're like trying to protect them from the big bad wolf. I don't want it to come across like that. What we're trying to do is create space. We're trying to create an environment where the creative can use all their energy to focus on what they do best and not spend their energy focusing on, wow, am I going to get fired? Does this person hate me, etc. A big theme too is also I'm trying to conserve energy and conserve brain power so that the team can focus on what they are best at and not get bogged down with all the bullshit. Number 3 actually happens outside of the workplace, and it's caring beyond the work. Small gestures make a big impact. I have found, again, as an observation, that people do their best work when they're valued as humans, not just as employees. So the tactic here is pay attention. Pay attention to what they care about. If they mention the fact that they are obsessed with pickleball, well, maybe when their birthday comes around or their work anniversary comes around, maybe you buy them a new racket, or maybe you buy them a gift card to buy, a new pair of shoes or something of that nature. It can be even a small gesture. Like maybe you just get them a Starbucks gift card and say, hey, I know you like to go early in the morning on the weekends to go play pickleball. Just wanted to add in a little caffeine for your next session. Little things go a long way because it's not the thing, it's that you are showing them that you care and you see them and you take note of who they are as a human, not just how they show up for you at work, but how they show up in life in general. And another way that you can show this and do this is the all dreaded, everyone fucking hates it, sick days, right? Like it's my least favorite thing in the world. I hate being sick. Everyone hates being sick. You know what's really cool when you're sick? When somebody sends you juice or soup or bread or something to help you feel better. I would highly recommend if somebody on your team is sick, if you have it in the budget, send them a cold press orange juice or one of those, ridiculously hot ginger shots that makes you sweat like crazy. Or if that's not in the cards and we don't have that in the budget, that's fine. You can send them a Slack message or a text or an email walking them through your normal remedy that you do. Every time I get the flu, I drink green tea, put on 50 blankets and watch old war films on Netflix or whatever your routine is. That's mine. That I have found, again, shows that you care. And it shows that you're not like assuming that they're just slacking off for the day. I think another thing that a lot of people deal with on sick days, there's this anxiety that looms, especially for remote workers, that their boss, their manager thinks that they're just fucking around and just taking the day off and not actually working. And I know you watching this video, that couldn't be further from the truth. That's not how you are. And so if you're leading the team, I would lead by showing the team that you don't assume that that's how they roll. I know for me, the first time this happened when I was sick and my boss sent me soup and bread, I was blown away. I was like, what the fuck is this? This is crazy. Like, wow, you really care. And what was so cool is then I didn't feel anxious all day. I was able to rest, get better, and then show up for work the next day and fucking murder it. And so, I'm not saying every time somebody's sick, send them a fucking, $20 cold pressed juice. I know they're expensive. I'm not saying send them a soup every time, but just show them that you care. This goes a long way. Not only are they going to be more excited about their work, they're going to be more loyal to you and the company. And that's what we want. We want longevity. We want consistency. We want continuity on the team. And so anything that we can do to ensure that our team sticks around for the longest amount of time is ultra, ultra important. The next one is elevating team members without forcing them into a leadership role necessarily. Here's the thing. What I have found with creatives, and I've managed quite a few, is they don't all necessarily want to be in leadership. In fact, a lot of them are very passionate about the thing they are doing. The designer, the video editor, the motion graphic artist, the videographer, the audio engineer. They love what they're doing. And a lot of them just want more ownership, more autonomy, and more responsibility within that lane, not necessarily managing people or managing an entire department and process. And so what I would recommend you do is instead of placing them as like the head of long form video content, for example, don't do that. Maybe just give them a seat at the table by giving them some ownership over the post-production process. Have them refine how you go about ingesting the footage all the way until deploying the video on YouTube. Maybe have them develop the editing playbook that you use to onboard new editors. Give them more responsibility and more ownership, but maybe don't put them in a place where they have to manage 3 people, because maybe that's not what they want. In fact, the majority of them do not. And what I have found is there is this very strange dynamic that occurs because a lot of people do want a raise and want a promotion. They want to make more money. And in most organizations, the only way that you get a raise or a promotion is you start taking on a management role. And so what I would encourage you to do is potentially consider making 2 paths, 2 tracks for your creative team. You can have the individual contributor path where they just keep leveling up in what they are doing and their subject matter expertise. So for a video editor, for example, you might adopt something similar to what developers do. So you might have video editor level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, and so on. And so this gives them a roadmap for how they can grow within your organization and how they can excel. And it shows them areas that they can improve on in order to move up. But again, it's not forcing them to manage people and do one-on-ones because, I don't want to stereotype, but a lot of editors, the last thing they want to do is do another meeting. An example of this is I had an editor on my previous team that was showing extreme ownership over the post-production process. I'm talking like constantly every week coming to me with new ideas, and not like the whole hey, I got another new shiny idea. These were refinements to the process to make it far more smooth for the whole entire team. And what I started to notice is, man, this individual is displaying a lot of signs of leadership. And so I had a conversation with him, and through discussing it, we realized he doesn't want to go into some management leadership role. What he liked was being the go-to guy to build out new processes, new systems, new playbooks for the post-production process, and also training and helping solve problems for other editors, but not managing them on like a people one-on-one level, more managing editing problems and coming up with creative solutions for it. And so what did I do? I didn't make him a manager. We just promoted him to be senior editor. And then what we did is had him develop all of the new processes in post and oversee all of the edits. So then he started taking on first passes of video reviews. And we expanded his ownership and responsibilities within his lane without ever putting him into a position that he would hate. See, leadership is not just about who manages people. It's about who sets the standard and who influences the team. The next one is teaching them to advocate for their own work. This is something that is often forgotten for creatives, and many of them struggle to communicate their value in business terms, something that executives will understand and care about. What this can lead to is a harder time getting buy-in from leadership, whether it's buy-in on a new project or buy-in on a promotion or a raise. If they can't see how what you do drives revenue in the business, there is a cap to what you will be able to earn and the type of raises and promotions that an individual will be able to get. So if you do not teach your team to be able to advocate for their own work, you're going to have a team that eventually is going to get frustrated and no longer want to be there because they're working hard, but they're not feeling like they are being compensated according to the work they are doing. But the executive team is like, why would we compensate you? We have no idea how what you do drives revenue and profitability for our business, because ultimately that's what we are, a business. And so we have to make decisions based on economics, not just off of personal feelings towards other humans. So recall back to the story I shared earlier in the video when I was talking about the editor who edited the documentary series behind the seminars that we were selling, and how we were able to communicate to her that her documentary closed an entire seminar. It's absolutely insane, right? Well, what this was the beginning of teaching the team to advocate for their work. Because what we did is we shared with the entire team how this video that she edited drove this revenue. Guess what? We are now implementing a tracking system where all of you can start to begin to look at what platform you're working on and how many leads that drives to the company. And ultimately, we're getting to the point where now you can start to see how many qualified leads. You can track from an Instagram video all the way to closing the sale. And so the more granular you can get, the easier it is to be able to arm your team with the tools necessary to advocate for their work. And so what I would encourage you to do is please, I implore you actually, teach your team how to advocate for their work. And I would recommend you do this in a formal setting. So I'm talking like a group training, call it like a 20-30 minute training presentation. It doesn't need to be anything crazy. This is not rocket science. It's very basic. And The more complicated you make it, the less likely they are to execute on it anyways. Number two is in a one-on-one informal scenario. I can't tell you the amount of conversations that I have had over the years with various people on my team talking about how they can go about sharing their work more effectively. One thing, as a simple side note that I've noticed, is a lot of creatives tend to share their work and say, look how cool this video is, or look how beautiful the story and the edit is. Well, I would encourage you, as best as possible, report on the data. Show the metrics, show how this was a 2.5x, 3x outlier compared to the average video that we post on TikTok or on LinkedIn, for example. I would try and show the engagement, right? The average view duration, how long did we hold attention? If you have the data on how many leads it generated, and ideally how many qualified leads that converted, share that information. Arm your team. Allow them to be able to advocate for themselves so that it's not always you having to advocate for them. Or better yet, you're doubling up. You're pairing you advocating for them and them advocating for themselves. And then we got a double win right there. Please invest in your team in this way because yes, it'll help you on the current team and all of that. But if somebody's coming onto your team, you want to invest and impact them for the rest of their lives. And so this is something that they can take with them wherever they go. And this is something that will allow them to be able to earn more than they ever thought they could because they're able to communicate their value in terms of business, not just creative. Now, great feedback and a strong growth culture are crucial. But here's the thing. If you're not careful about how you go about this growth culture, there's this little thing called burnout that will creep in. Now, real quick, I want to address something. There are a lot of people online that talk about how burnout is or isn't real. And I do not want to play that game. We can use any other term other than burnout if it makes it easier for you to hear it. Call it work fatigue, career fatigue. It happens to everyone. Anyone who says that they haven't experienced it is fucking lying. It's not true. There have been moments. Not everybody feels fucking stoked and impacted and fulfilled with the work they're doing all the time. It's just not possible. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But with that in mind, let's just continue using the term burnout. I'm sure this will get clipped out of context and stuff, but it doesn't matter. I hope that you watching this get the value out of this moment because I think this is extremely useful if you are leading a team of creatives, especially a team of creatives that like to work really hard and push the boundaries. Now, creatives love a challenge, so I'm not saying don't push them by any means. I actually very much encourage you to push them right to the edge, but not over the edge. Here's the thing. Unclear expectations and an incorrect incentive can really drain energy fast. And this is something that I've observed with many different teams. Let's say, for example, you have an incentive that you've given to the team around views. But ultimately, what you're trying to build is a brand that is profiting off of your ideal customer. Not getting any old Molly or Joe to watch, you're wanting your ideal customer. And so if you incentivize your team based off of views, but then you punish them because conversions and sales aren't going up, well, that is what I would call a misaligned incentive. And this is something that I fucking promise you from the bottom of my heart, this will cause the most amount of burnout, far more than heavy workloads. In fact, I would argue that a lot of creatives that are very passionate around what they're doing, if they're not given enough work, they do check out and they do kind of burn out in another way. I've been there. That's literally happened to me before. And so I don't think it's as much about workload as much as it's around clarity and aligned incentives with the business objectives. So with all of that, how do you keep your team engaged, working hard, accomplishing big shit without driving them into the ground? Well, it's a very fucking fine line, I will tell you that. And it starts with understanding what the triggers of burnout are. I want to make sure it's super clear. I'm not saying decrease the workload on your team. I really truly believe that a lot of people that are passionate around what they do want more, not less. Burnout isn't about overwork. It's often a mix of lack of autonomy, unclear expectations, and an unsustainable pace. And so what I would encourage you to do is watch for the warning signs. Usually what this looks like is declining creativity, disengagement, showing up to meetings on Zoom with your video off a little bit more, or maybe you're on video on Zoom, but just not contributing much to the conversation, if anything at all. Avoiding challenges. If you present a tough problem, they do everything they can to avoid actually solving that problem themselves. Or lastly, oftentimes I've noticed emotional exhaustion. And what this can display itself as is maybe a little bit less self-control with their emotions. Maybe they're a little bit more quick to fly off the handle, get frustrated, or in some instances, get more emotional on the sad side and cry, or get, highly anxious and worked up. These are typically signs that burnout is either here or coming, or as we said earlier, career fatigue. So a couple of things that you can do to help this are, one, normalize rest and recovery. It sounds insane, but over the last decade, I feel like we've kind of gone up and down on the whole hustle culture shit. And I don't want to get into that. That's not my lane by any means. But I do believe that if you don't, as a leader, take a pause, your team won't either. And I remember there was one time where a boss of mine, she said, it was crazy. I was debating whether or not to take some time off. And she was like, well, why wouldn't you? I told her all the different projects that I had, all the crazy shit that was going on, the different campaigns, interpersonal things on the team that I was having to handle, just tons of shit. And she's like, well, is that ever going to go away? Like, no. It's like, does your team experience something similar? Like, in their own way. Yeah, totally. Well, then you need to be an example to them of it's okay to take time off, even in the midst of craziness. In fact, that might be the best time to take time off. But if you never do that, your team will never do that. And so I remember there was one editor in particular that when we hired her, it's so funny. I remember the first 9 months, she didn't take a day off. I'm pretty sure she worked probably almost every weekend, just never was taking a day off. I was constantly seeing uploads occurring on Frame at 2 a.m, Saturday nights, Sunday mornings, craziness. And after a while, I was like, hey, do we want to take some time off? Can you at least take a weekend off? If not, maybe put in some time for some vacation. I value rest and recovery here. I think that if we are pushing the red line all the time, cool, we might be producing good work, but we're not gonna have any energy to innovate. We're not gonna have any creativity left to be able to try something completely different and new. We're just gonna be robotically doing what we have always done. And so I really encouraged her to do this. Now, funny enough, she came back to me about 2 or 3 weeks later and was like, yeah, I would love to take some time off. And granted, she gave me a really good heads up, but it was 3 weeks off for a European vacation. And that was awesome. And, at first I had a panic attack for a moment. I was like, oh my God, you're one of 2 editors on this team. What the fuck are we going to do? I might be screwed. But then I immediately jumped to, no, we're going to figure this out. This is going to be a great example to the team that we can make it happen. And so the point of all of this is that in a world where a lot of these hardos on the internet are talking about never take time off and always push through and ignore everything and never rest, I value rest. And I think a lot of them do too. I think that they make money pushing that message or whatever. Maybe they get excited or feel better about, I don't know. It doesn't matter. But regardless, what I can tell you is rest is crucial. I think we're finally at a point in society where we're starting to talk more about the value of sleep and how important it is to not only our health, but our effectiveness in the workplace, how we show up in our relationships, athletics, etc. I want to emphasize there's nothing wrong with rest. It's great to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. It's great to take a couple weeks of vacation every year. Now, there are seasons and times in our lives where maybe we don't do that. I'm just coming off the back of a pretty intense season where I didn't really take any time off. I took days here and there, but I didn't take a week vacation. I just went on my first vacation, real proper one, in probably 7, 8 years. And it was amazing and I loved it. And guess what? I came back refreshed, full of ideas, and very fired up to get rolling. And so I would encourage you to look at your team and see who are the characters that aren't taking much time, are working every weekend, and just check in on them and see hey, and maybe that is what they want to do. And by all means, let them do it. We should not be making decisions or informing other people that we know better about their personal lives than they do. That's never the case. But sometimes, especially younger individuals that are less experienced, might not understand how to pace themselves. It's like running a marathon. If you go all out sprint for the first 5 miles, you might be fucked. And so it's our job, the ones who have been on the race longer and understand some of the areas where it's going to get tougher. Maybe we know that there's a hill coming, for example, or whatever. We know how to pace ourselves and the people around us a little bit better. So check in with your team and make sure that they are taking appropriate time to rest and recover so they can show up the best for you and the team. The next thing we want to do to help avoid burnout is to systematize workflows. A lot of times burnout isn't necessarily just the volume of work, but it might be the inefficiencies that you have in place of how you go about that volume of work. And so something that I have observed is that a lot of organizations don't understand the way that a creative works best. In most organizations and most businesses, meetings are what drive things forward. Amazing, right? Most creatives watching this, hearing what I just said, they're like, I fucking hate meetings. Like, it takes away from the very thing I was hired to do. Every meeting that happens randomly throughout the day, not only is it 30 minutes away from the edit, but it's actually taking a minimum of 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after as well. So every meeting, every 30-minute meeting might actually be taking an hour and a half away from their efficiency, because it might take 30 minutes for them to wind down from the edit, or maybe that last 30 minutes, they're constantly checking the clock to make sure they're not late to the meeting. And then after the meeting, it might take a minimum of 30 minutes to get back into the flow state that they were in when they were editing. And so something that I propose that you consider putting into place to help deal with this and help not have this be a problem is a maker-manager schedule. Now, this was originated by Paul Graham. There's an amazing article online about it. I would highly recommend that you read it. He does it far more justice than I will, but I will quickly give you a top-level view. Basically, he distinguishes how there is maker work and there is manager work. Maker work is typically done in isolation or with just a few individuals where you're doing deep focused work on creating something. And then manager work is when you are collaborating with other individuals in a meeting setting. Typically, managers move the needle forward by doing meetings. Makers move the needle forward by making. Shocking. But the thing is most organizations prefer the schedule of a manager, not the maker. And so it removes efficiency for the editor. Sure, it's great for the manager, but the editor is constantly having to juggle these awkward 30-minute or 15-minute gaps in between meetings where what can they do? What can you edit in 15 minutes? So the way that I like to use Maker Manager is I like to split up my days, and ideally I like to batch days according to either a maker or a manager schedule. So the way that I currently run is my Tuesdays and Thursdays are my manager days. This is when the majority of my meetings occur. Now, of course, there's times where I take a call on a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. That happens. Maybe it's a really exciting opportunity, or I just, don't have anything that I'm making at the moment. But I like to block Tuesdays and Thursdays for my manager days. And then that means that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I try to block as much of the day as possible to just have for maker time. Now, I have that luxury because I'm running my own business. If you have a team within an organization, it's probably not going to work that way. So an example of what I've done in the past when I was within a bigger business that had many different departments that all had different meetings occurring, Monday was my manager day. And I mean, goddamn, did I manage. I mean, it was meetings stacked from usually like 8:30 a.m. until 5:30 p.m. Back to back to back, no breaks in between. Maybe like a quick 15-minute buffer halfway through the day just to go take a piss, grab a protein shake, protein bar, whatever, and then get right back into the calls. It was absurd, but I liked it because the rest of my week was far more focused. So then what I would do is Tuesdays, I would split the day. Basically 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. or usually 7 a.m. to 12 p.m. was my maker time. So that's a 5-hour window where I'm not taking any calls unless it's an emergency, of course, and I'm just working on making something and putting a lot of effort into the deep focus, deep work. Then what I would do is from noon to 5, that was my manager time. So this is when I made my calendar available to be booked for different meetings. The ideal version of this is that you have one day a week where you knock them all out. But the reality is if you're in an organization, that's just not how it works. There's other meetings that have to take place because other departments have different schedules and different functions. I would do my very best to try and inch the meetings back as far in the day as possible. Ideally, I don't get a meeting booked at 12:30 and then not another one until 4. That's a really awkward, shitty gap. So ideally, you want to book towards the end of your day if possible so that you have as much time to focus on maker work as humanly possible. Now, Wednesdays, I treated as a maker day. And we actually did this team-wide for the media team. And I found this unbelievably effective. What we had was a rule. You could have a one-on-one meeting with somebody if you needed to. If you're jamming on an edit and you want feedback or you want to jam on ideas, cool, whatever. go and do that. But we did not allow for meetings with more than 2 people. And the reason why is we wanted to create a space where nobody felt like they were guilted into saying yes to dropping what they were working on and jumping on a call. In fact, we wanted to create a system that de-incentivized things of that nature because we wanted extreme focus on Wednesdays. And so a lot of times I would actually work from home on a Wednesday so that I could really go deep and not have to worry about any potential distractions of somebody coming up and tapping my shoulder to just quickly pick my brain. And then Thursday and Friday followed the same schedule as Tuesday. Again, we would go 7 a.m. to 12 p.m. is maker time, and then 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. is manager time. I have found this to be incredibly effective. And almost, I won't say 100% because I feel like that is like too good to be true, but the majority of the creatives that I have managed over the years love this schedule. And they take it with them when they move on to other organizations or if they go on to do their own thing in freelance or build their own business. Now, the next one is probably extremely familiar to all of you watching, which is managing shiny object syndrome. Not only does this apply to business owners and entrepreneurs, it applies to creatives. They see new opportunities and new ideas everywhere. But the thing is if you chase every one of those ideas and opportunities, that can end up leading to scattered execution and inconsistent execution. And so what I would like to encourage you to do is teach your team discernment. And this is a very hard thing to teach and train other individuals to pick up on. So rather than telling you step by step, I'm going to share a story with you that I think will help. There was an incredibly talented editor on my team, and he was on the short form division, the short form side of things. This individual did an amazing job as an individual contributor. Leveled up, was very quickly the #1 shorts editor on our team, was the go-to guy for everyone. They asked him all the questions, everything. I remember we came to this point, I want to say it was like a year or so into him being on the team. He started noticing how sexy the YouTube editing was and how cool that looked and how much that our CEO and founder at the time valued YouTube content, maybe in comparison to short form content. And so this individual came to me and said, hey, I kind of want to start working on YouTube videos, on long form content, not just short form. You know, they didn't make this in a demanding way. They just said like, this is something that I'm starting to gain interest in, and I would love to talk to you about whether or not we can make that happen. Obviously in my head, I'm like, oh, I need you on shorts. Like that's why you're here. And that's where you're so gifted and talented. And I don't have somebody that can just step into your role right now. But instead of sharing all of that, I just said, okay, cool, let's explore this. Let's have the conversation. And so what I did is I painted 2 paths for him. Path 1 was you have already grown immensely in short form content. You are already the go-to guy. And very quickly, you could be promoted to senior editor, literally the top dog on the short form team. Very quickly after that, I think you could be managing people, even at a very young age. I remember the other path was, well, you could go over to YouTube. Here's the reality. I wouldn't encourage you to necessarily do this for every single person on your team, but sometimes you have A players that it's like, I want to keep you around. And so if that means taking 6 months to try out a different style of content that you make in order to keep you engaged, well, then maybe that's something that's worth exploring from my point of view. And so I told him, I was like, well, we can go the YouTube route. I'm fine with that. Here's how it's going to go though. We already have 3 very established, strong YouTube editors. And so you will be going from top dog to bottom of the pack. And the chances of you getting a leadership role and a senior role are very slim because you have 3 people who have been doing this for a very long time and a long time within our organization that are already on track for that. I just posed it as these are the 2 options and here are the benefits and here are the cons. I told them, yes, long form editing is fun and I know you enjoy it. And so I think that would be a lot of fun, but you're going to be starting from the beginning and it's going to take a lot longer to get to where you want in your career. However, if you climb the ladder on the short form side and then a year from now or 2 years from now, you're like, I still want that long form content. I want to take that on. Well, then we could move you over there, but it'd be in a completely different frame because you would be a manager, a leader. You would be the top dog from shorts and going over there in more of a lateral move rather than starting from the bottom. And when I presented this to him, he thought through it and he basically came back to me, I want to say within like a day or 2. And he was like, yeah, I want to continue going the shorts route. I understand that this level of focus will give me bigger outcomes in my career and move me quicker along in my career trajectory of where I want to go faster. And I thought this was really wise of him. But what I was doing was I was posing to him the possibilities and how he can discern what the best opportunity is for him at that time. That's not to say that long form editing wasn't a great opportunity for him in his career. It just may not have been the right thing at that time. Teach your team how to discern what opportunities are worth going after and worth chasing versus the ones that are just a shiny object that are going to distract you from the thing that matters the most. Now, another one that a lot of people struggle with is the debate between structure versus chaos. I've been on plenty of media teams that thrive or say they thrive in chaos. And then I've been on plenty of media teams that maybe have a little too much structure, a little too much process. And I think that the right answer is in the happy medium. Go figure, right? It's a cliche for a reason. Too much structure ends up stifling innovation, but too little leads to disorder and confusion. And the enemy of creativity is confusion. The more clarity you can provide, the easier it is for the team to be creative because they're not having to waste their energy on understanding. They're deploying all their energy on being creative and innovating off of the clarity you have provided. And so I encourage you, set clear objectives, share the mission, share the vision, let them know what you're wanting to accomplish, and then give creative space for them to decide how they want to go about it. Now, one thing I would encourage you to do is not necessarily adopt a one-size-fits-all approach here. You're going to have different functions, different roles, different subsections of your media team that are going to function differently. And so some areas might thrive or work a little bit better in chaos. For example, if you are a team built around a busy, fast-paced entrepreneur, well, the videographer crew is probably going to be living in a world of chaos. That's just the reality. I know when I worked for Gary, things were shifting all the time, right? We were booking flights last minute. We were finding out that he wanted to do a podcast last minute and having to set up within 5 minutes in his office. I loved that shit. It was always very exciting, but there was more chaos there. Now, in a long form editing world, if you're a team that has a pretty big YouTube editing function, well, that might be something that you want to have more system and process in order to make sure that things don't get dropped, or that we're actually hitting deadlines that we've set and making sure that we're consistently uploading content. And so I recommend reverse engineering your team. Reverse engineer the individual functions and sub-departments almost of your media team, because the different functions require different levels of systems and process. Some will thrive off chaos and disorder. Some will fucking crumble. And when I say chaos and disorder, I want to make it very clear. This should be organized chaos and disorder. There should be rules in place and then you break the rules. If you're just breaking, well, that's the problem. You need rules in place in order to break the rules. And so I encourage you, establish the rules, establish a system that you don't hold religiously, that you can be a little bit more fluid within and allow the team's creativity to flourish. And in line with this structure versus chaos is the power of creative guardrails. A lot of people think that constraints kill creativity. I think that they actually can fuel it if used correctly. For example, instead of saying, make this video go viral or promote my new 6-hour video on how to build a brand on YouTube, instead, maybe give them a few more creative guardrails. Say, I want you to create a video that is a mashup of me talking about how to build a brand, but only use moments where I have been speaking on a podcast. What you'll find here is that, yes, this is a constraint. They can only use clips. In this case, Trevor can only use clips where I'm talking about how to build a brand on a podcast. But within that, Trevor, knowing him, will create a very engaging and artistic and cool and valuable reel that we could put together using those moments. I can't tell you how many times that I've been given a creative constraint. Maybe the talent that we're working with says, hey, I'm not gonna be able to film for the next month. And we haven't filmed anything for the last 2 weeks. So we have no new videos to go out next month. How are you gonna go about making 4 new YouTube videos? Well, then I'm gonna default to mashups. And so then I'm gonna go to the team and say, hey, we don't have any new footage with whoever we're working with at the time. And so what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to pull moments from previously recorded content that are all thematic around one topic, and then we can put together an inspirational mashup, for example. Well, what did we just do? We were given creative guardrails, and then we came up with a creative solution to get around those guardrails. So I believe that a lot of innovation actually comes from creative guardrails and constraints. Rather than what a lot of people believe, which is that it eliminates creativity, I think it allows it to thrive. So avoiding burnout isn't just about managing workloads. As we've been talking about throughout this whole section, it's about being a leader that is worth following, that your team wants to follow. The best media teams don't thrive under fear or micromanagement. They thrive under leadership that supports, challenges, and truly believes in them. So let's talk about what that looks like with 3 different principles that I want to share with you on how you can be the leader that your team wants to follow. Principle number 1, lead with empathy. The best leaders don't demand respect. They earn it. Your team should feel like they can come to you with problems, ideas, and challenges without fear of judgment. And so the tactic here is be intentional with your check-ins. Don't just check in on deadlines and deliverables. Ask your team how they're doing. What are they struggling with? What are they enjoying that they want to do more of? How are things going outside of work? Obviously, there's certain bounds that we can't cross and lines that we can't cross here. And so there's boundaries, obviously, but realize that they're a whole person. And when they're at work, that is just a part of who they are as a person. It's not their whole being. And so there are things that may be happening outside of work. For example, if somebody shows up and is a little bit more chippy or a little shorter, well, maybe they had a really rough morning. Maybe something went terrible. Maybe their car broke down. Maybe they're having a fight with their spouse. Whatever it could be, it's not an excuse, but it can allow you to have a little bit more empathy for what they are going through and maybe meet them in the middle. A really hard example that happened last year is a team member of mine came to me about a death in their family. And what they told me was, hey, I just want to make you aware of this in case I seem off in any way. My work ethic isn't going to change. I'm not going to check out or anything. I don't need any time off. I just want to make you aware. And I immediately was like, no, you absolutely should take time off. Now, if what you need right now is to continue working in order to process and move through this, cool. I don't know how you roll. But if you're trying to do this because you're worried about how I'm going to perceive you, I'm only going to respect you more for prioritizing your family. Like, that's the thing that's most important here. It's an example of me trying to meet them where they were at. And so instead of them taking time off because that's not what they wanted, I actually just sat with them in our office for 2 hours and just processed with them. And we didn't go over any work or anything. That was 2 hours where no work took place. There was no productivity happening there. But what I was doing is I was showing up as a real fucking human and showing this individual, I care about you, not just the work you contribute to my team. I care about you, the human. And I care about how you go through life and how you navigate these scenarios. I think ultimately and fundamentally what we're wanting to do here is we're wanting to show them that we truly care. Now, the reality is you have to actually care. If you don't, you can't manufacture it. If you try and fake it, people will sniff that out immediately. So 1, have empathy before you can lead with empathy. But please, I'm so tired of this anti-empathy movement in leadership and like the highly aggressive, demonstrative way of leading. I'm sure it's effective and I'm sure it drives results. But at the end of the day, if people are leaving your team fairly consistently and you have high turnover, that is lost productivity and lost efficiency. And so if we're trying to improve the bottom line, I would argue that continuity with your team is something that will do that. And a great way to get continuity and maintain continuity with your team is to actually care about them. Principle number 2, lead by example and demonstrate your work ethic in action. Don't just talk about it. As the leader of the team, you set the standard through your own effort, discipline, and consistency. People follow leaders who put in the work themselves. So the tactic here is to show, not tell. If you're gonna expect a high standard from your team, you better be the fucking first person to set it and maintain it. I'll tell you, I know there was a time, probably 4 or 5 years ago, where there was like a 2-month stint where I was out of it for whatever reason. And I was showing up not in the best way. I was a little bit more checked out, a little bit lazy. It wasn't long, it was just 2 months, but that was still 2 months where I wasn't showing up in the way that I like to. And what did I observe in the team? They were doing the same thing. They were starting to make simple, stupid mistakes. Silly mistakes that normally we would never make, but we were just being a little bit more careless. And something actually that I remember my youth pastor when I was in high school told me, Jeff Moores. I was on the worship team. So for those of you that don't understand like church and all that shit, there's this thing called a worship band and you play before the message. Anyways, I played bass in the worship band And Jeff came to me and all the other members of the worship team, which were all my best friends. And we were all sitting around and he came to us and he said, hey guys, I just want you to know you're leaders now. You being up on stage on the worship team makes you a leader. And when you are a leader, the rest of the youth group in this case will look to you as an example, but they're not going to do what you do. They're going to do what you do times 10. And so in that case, you know, it's like if they see you smoking cigarettes in the parking lot, they're going to smoke 10 cigarettes, you know, on and on and on. You can imagine all the other examples that he gave us. But I actually believe that that's super true as a leader. What you do, your team will do in orders of magnitude. They will do way more. If you show up 5-10 minutes late, they might show up 30 to 60 minutes late. And so you want to make sure that you are demonstrating the standard that you hold them to by your actions, not your words. Principle number 3, transparency is your biggest asset. Leaders who pretend to have all the answers create massive disconnect with their team. People respect true honesty far more than a leader who's trying to pretend like they have it all together and they're doing everything intentionally. I mean, let's just use a very easy example that we've all experienced in our careers. The manager or leader who makes a mistake and then pretends or tries to cover that mistake by pretending that this is what they wanted to do all along. They were just testing something out or just experimenting here. Just trying to make themselves look better by posturing. Nobody likes that. Nobody respects that. I encourage you as a leader, own your mistakes. I'll tell you, for me, the way I like to operate is my goal is always to be the first person to vocalize when I have fucked up instead of somebody else. Whether it be a member of my team or the CEO or founder, I would rather call out my fuck ups before somebody else does. And that can be on a grand scale or it can be on a micro scale. Like I've mentioned throughout this video, if I have an idea for a video, as an example, and I have somebody on my team dedicate a whole day to put this video together and then it completely bombs, okay, cool. I'm going to be the first person to call my ass out in Slack and be like, well, Caleb's idea fucking flopped. What a shitty idea. All right, on to the next one. But the tactic here is if you make a mistake, and you will, because guess what? We are humans and humans make mistakes. When you make that mistake, own it immediately. If a project underperforms, don't shift blame. Instead, analyze, learn, and implement those learnings on your next project and inform the team of those learnings that you got, rather than trying to brush it off as either somebody else's fault or something that you planned all along. Again, you're going to earn far more respect from your team by just admitting it. And as we wrap this up, I want you to remember something. Leadership isn't about control. It's about creating the right conditions for your team to thrive. Your media team doesn't need someone telling them exactly what to do every second. They need clarity, trust, and space to do their best work. When you create that kind of environment, they're not just employees that are clocking in, they're employees that are fully invested in the mission. We've covered the mindset shifts, the tactical frameworks, and leadership philosophies that will help you build and scale a team of high agency, high impact creatives. But this isn't a one and done process. Great leadership is about constant iteration. So ask yourself the following questions. Am I empowering my team and leading my team, or am I just managing them? Am I creating a culture where people feel safe to take risks? And am I leading by example and holding myself to the same standard that I hold the team to? If you can answer those honestly and actually take action, you are ahead of 99% of leaders. This isn't just about building a team that delivers. It's about building a culture of innovation, ownership, and growth. And the cool thing is, when you do that, the work doesn't just get better, your people do too. And if you found this video on how to lead a media team valuable, I think you will find my in-depth course on how to build a brand insanely valuable. It's my subjective opinion, but I believe this is the most in-depth free course that you can find on how to build a brand on YouTube right now. Hope you enjoy. All right, dude, that's a wrap. Holy shit, what a fucking long day. That was dope. Loved it. Pretty fucking happy.